So you want to learn Japanese with video games? Awesome. Well, in this video, we're going to go through exactly how to actually do that, what level Japanese you need to be able to start playing games in Japanese, and also have a look at a bunch of different tools that you can use to help you learn Japanese and the process to go through when you're actually playing them. Now, before we get started, I just want to let you know just very quickly a bit about my learning philosophy. I believe that there is no such thing as a correct way to study. There's so many different ways that you can learn language. It's such an exciting and fun journey that's with you pretty much your whole life, right? You're always learning. I've been studying for over 10 years and I'm still always learning new things. So for me, there is no right way to study. I think the most important thing is that you actually enjoy the study process, that you actually enjoy and want to keep doing it as long as you can. Because realistically, learning a language is not going to happen overnight. As much as you may want to, doing things as efficiently and as quickly as possible, the reality is that while that can help you make huge jumps in your progress being efficient, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to keep it up, that you're going to enjoy it, and that it's necessarily the right way to study. There is no right way, just whatever way is best for you, whatever way is going to help you keep it up. Learning a language is definitely more like a marathon than a race. It's a very fun marathon, especially if you can find ways to enjoy that journey. So the aim of this video is to kind of help you enjoy that journey by playing video games to learn Japanese. So, number one, the most important thing for me is that you enjoy the process. Because if you enjoy the process, then you're more likely to do it tomorrow, and you're more likely to continue the next day and the next day and the next day. Another thing is that I believe that speed is a little bit more important than depth. And the reason why is because you're going to be coming across the same language over and over again. And if you don't come across that same piece of language over and over again, maybe it's not that important. So what's more important is that you quickly get the answer you're looking for so that you can understand the whole sentence and then move on. Not spending half an hour on one word or one grammar point, but more finding out what the answer is, moving on quickly so that you can build this understanding slowly over time, rather than needing to understand everything 100% before you move on to the next thing. I think this will help you with your enjoyment of study as well, because you're less likely to get burnt out when you're just like, oh god, I've just ruined myself trying to understand like 2 pieces of grammar. Well, just get a general understanding and you will see it again, and when you do, see if your previous knowledge applies in that next situation, rather than needing to learn all of the rules of everything in one go. Now, I understand that as a learner, that might be the way that you think you need to do things, right? Especially with the more formal education, that's often how it's approached, where you need to learn everything as best you possibly can, and you have this big dictionary definition that you need to memorize and learn all about. And I understand that a lot of people may want to learn that way, and that's great. If it works for you, it works for you. But I believe it's more important just to quickly get that understanding, and so you can move on to the next thing. So it's more of a quantity game, right? Because you're going to build that more native understanding over time, rather than right away. This works if you're enjoying the process. Okay, cool, so you want to start playing games in Japanese. Now, a lot of people might be a bit intimidated to actually start playing games because they feel like that they need to know the language before they start actually playing. That's not necessarily true. And the reason why, just to give you a little bit of a numbers game here, is that if you studied all of the JLPT, you're still probably going to be coming across like 50% of the language new that you've never seen before. And you're thinking, hang on a second, but I studied the JLPT. I've learnt 10,000 words. Why don't I understand everything? And the reason why is because the JLPT and a lot of textbooks are actually trying to teach you more things like travel, business, work language, rather than the language you see in video games. So, the point of this is that you don't necessarily have to study all of the JLPT before you can start playing video games, because you're still going to be learning a ton of new language. The important thing is to find a fun way to approach that new language. Really developing that skill, I believe, is one of the most important things. Developing the skill of how you come across new language, how you deal with this situation, how you deal with when you don't understand something. and how you remove that frustration so you're more likely to continue in the future. So some people believe that you can't actually start playing games until your Japanese is at a much higher level, right? Some people say you need to be N3 or N2 level Japanese. And while it's true that that will make your journey much easier as you play games, because you'll have a stronger kind of background and you'll know more grammar and you'll know more words, so the amount that you don't know is a little bit less. However, you're always going to be coming across language that you don't know. So just because your language level is lower doesn't necessarily mean that you can't get started playing games, just be aware that it is going to be more challenging for you. So learning a language really is the same as any other skill, right? It takes a lot of time and you don't really notice your progress. But every day that you do a little bit of it, you keep making more and more progress until one day you realize, wow, I can do that really difficult thing that was really difficult a year ago, now I can do it really easy. Without even really noticing, you make that huge progress. And that's kind of what it's like learning Japanese with a video game. So just keep in mind, guys, that while you may not feel that progress, every single time you look something up, every single time you try to read a sentence in Japanese, you're making progress. So when's a good time to start? Well, you could start at a complete beginner, someone who knows absolutely nothing, but just be aware that it's going to be very difficult. However, if you have the right tools to go through the process, it's definitely possible. But you just need to change your expectations, because remember, everything you don't know, so you're going to have to need to be looking up everything. And this can get really challenging because you don't necessarily know what's a word, what's a verb, what's this conjugation, where's the particle, where does it end, where does it begin. It makes it quite challenging when you don't have a background of grammar understanding from like the N4, N3 level, and you don't have a couple thousand vocabulary under your belt. However, that doesn't mean it's impossible. You just need to change your expectations. Know that it's going to be difficult, but you will make that progress the more you come across this language. You don't have to do Anki, right? That's what I'm trying to say. You can. Anki's very effective. It's just not very fun. If you have the motivation and the enthusiasm to play games in Japanese, even though you're only at like a lower N5 level, that's fantastic. If you have the motivation, great. However, just know that it will be challenging. So when do I recommend learning Japanese with video games? That's a tough one. If you have the motivation, I believe you can start anytime with the right tools and the right mindset. If you don't have those things, and you just want to actually start getting reading in a more comfortable level, then perhaps it would be better to be around about the N3-ish level for both grammar and vocabulary. At that point, you're going to be starting to learn a little bit more technical language that you may not actually see as much in video games, and especially more in the N2 and N1, you'll start to learn a lot more language that's not actually going to help you as much as the N5, N4, N3 will to help you read in Japanese. And that's actually why I made the N5 grammar series and the N4 grammar series, and why I'm working on the N3 grammar series, is because that's kind of, once you finish that point, then it's going to be much more easier for you to get into Japanese games. So realistically, if you look at your options, right, you could start at a complete beginner. However, you really need to make sure that you approach it with the right mindset and the right tools so that you can actually work through a very challenging battle. But if you have that motivation, fantastic, that's great. Or you can take a little bit more of the comfortable approach, learn a bunch of language first, right? Learn the grammar, learn up to about N3 grammar, learn a couple thousand vocabulary, get familiar with a decent chunk of kanji. You don't have to know them all, but get a decent chunk, and that will make your life a lot easier. You definitely don't need to be an advanced level student before starting playing games in Japanese. You definitely don't need to finish the JLPT before playing games in Japanese. However, just know that the more that you know, the easier the process, the easier the ride is going to be. However, everyone, even the people who have finished the JLPT, will have difficulties when they first start playing, because they're going to be coming across language they're not familiar with. They're going to have to be looking at the structure of the sentence and piecing it all together, and that takes time to develop those skills. And that's actually why I've made the vocab series and the kind of let's play videos, because I want to kind of help you guys just understand the structure of language, how it all put together, and just get the exposure and growth, slow growth over time. And that's kind of why I started those vocab series, let's play type videos, because I believe that's kind of a nice, easier way to give you guys that same experience of going through the game, but having it kind of walked through, rather kind of guided through that. Okay, so I've been talking a lot about the right tools to help you learn Japanese. What does that mean? So it really all depends on how you want to play video games. Do you just want to pick up your Nintendo Switch and start playing and just play like that and learn Japanese? Do you want to play on a computer and, use a lot of tools and things on your computer? Do you want to perhaps use your smartphone to help you, with gaming, for example, and looking things up on your dictionary? It really depends on what you want to do. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start from the very beginning with the least amount of tools and progress to the highest amount of tools. Okay, so let's say you've picked up your Nintendo Switch, or you're playing a game on your console or even your PC, and you just want to play games. You don't want to use any tools, you don't want to use any tricks, you just want to get into gaming. Then in that situation, I would highly recommend checking out a game that has furigana, logs, replayable audio, or game scripts. If you have any of these things, it's really going to make your life a lot easier to play and learn Japanese. So if you don't want to use any tools to help you, then I would highly recommend a game like, for example, Famicom Tantei series, the Nintendo Detective series on the Nintendo Switch. There's 2 games for that, and they're kind of visual novels with furigana, voice acting, and logs. Or perhaps a game like Yokai Watch or Ni no Kuni that has a ton of furigana that is incredibly accessible, and a really good game for beginners. Both of these games I just covered on my Switch tier list. Games like this would be really beneficial for someone who doesn't want to use any external tools and they just want to be able to play the game, that's it. The reason why is because they have furigana, so you can read all of the kanji. So that means you don't need to know all of the kanji to be able to actually read. Okay, so you can just go, oh, there's a word, and I can read the word, let's just quickly look it up. And that way you get the slow exposure over time of the kanji, and you can learn all the readings over time, rather than learning them all at once. And I actually think that's a much more enjoyable and kind of almost a little bit more effective, deeper way of understanding the language, because you see how it's actually used rather than how it should be used. Right? When you're learning something in a textbook or Anki, you're kind of learning how it should apply, but you're not actually seeing it, how it's actually used in context. If you have voice acting, for example, then that can really help your listening skills, which is really important. Listening is also connected to your speech, so understanding how, Japanese sounds, and not only does it make it a lot more interesting for you as a learner, I personally really kind of want any game that I play in Japanese to have voice acting for the most part, because it's just so interesting and interactive, and it really connects you. It really you can look forward to the next line a little bit more. If you have a log on the game, then that's incredible, because what that means is that you can just replay that audio. So maybe, for example, you come across a word that you're like, what is this? I don't know. Well, if you play a game that doesn't have furigana, doesn't have a log, then you're really kind of stuck. You need to get your phone and you need to write in the stroke order and hope that the right kanji pops up. Then you need to write the hiragana, then you need to look at it in your dictionary. It makes it a little bit more challenging, right? Now, remember, I'm saying without using any tools, right? But just how you would approach something without using any tools. But if you have a log with replayable audio, then you can just listen to that word over and over again and go, oh, there it is, type it in, yep, that's it, great, right? So it can practice your listening skills while you're learning, right? So that's really useful to do something like that. The other thing that I said, which is kind of a pre-tool, it's a mini tool, is using a game script. Now, that's actually personally what I did with my first 2 games. Well, my first game, I used a game script a little bit, and that was with Final Fantasy VII. Now, Final Fantasy VII doesn't have any voice acting, it doesn't have any logs, it doesn't have any furigana. So normally, this would be a bit of a challenging game to learn Japanese with. However, thanks to some amazing people on the internet who have actually gone to the painstaking efforts of writing down every single line of dialogue, thanks to these game scripts that are available online, you can actually, as you're playing, for example, on the Switch, you're just playing along, oh yeah, and then you see a piece of language you don't know. Well, what you can do is you can try and write the sentence, like the rest of the sentence, into like Control F, right? Find any part of the sentence you understand, really. Control F, and then quickly find that sentence that you're on, and then you can just instantly look up the language. What I personally like to do is use something like Tenten or Yomi-chan, which are browser extensions that all you have to do is just highlight your mouse over the word. Instantly, you can see the definition of the word. So that for me is the most enjoyable, the most easiest, the most streamlined process of looking something up. I know there's lots of tools out there, but personally, I think this is probably the most comfortable when you're actually playing. You don't want to mess around with all these things, right? You want the process to be really simple. And so that's something that I highly recommend. That's kind of the first tool, the first step of tools, is using a game script, because you can just look it up instantly and get that answer. Now, the next step that you could go to, if you want to start using a little bit more tools, for example, let's just keep it on the console, and let's say you want to start using your phone. Well, as I said, right, you could write in the kanji. That's kind of a little bit of a tool where you could, use your pen or whatever, or your finger, and you could write down the kanji into a dictionary. Another really useful thing that you could try doing is actually using Google Lens. Google Lens is a really interesting app that you can download on your phone, and you can also use on the computer. And all you have to do is just get your phone and just aim it at your switch, right? Aim it at the piece of language that you don't know, like, oh, what's this? Aim it. And then it will instantly look up that language. Instantly, the answer will come up on your phone, and even you can use it with a translation if you want. Although I don't recommend that because it's kind of like Google Translation, it's not very good. But you can instantly get that text. Now, the accuracy is pretty decent. I would say it's maybe 90% accuracy. And the really cool thing about the app is that you can look up the text, so you can copy it and search things up, but you can also press the audio play button and the phone will actually say the line to you in a kind of robotic voice, which is super cool, right? That means if you just want to know how to read something, all you have to do is just, take a photo and instantly you can read that line. So that's kind of cool, right? And that's a very easy thing to do. It's not too complicated. Almost anyone can do that. Just install the Google Lens app and take a photo. Pretty simple. The next step in using tools to help you learn Japanese, we're now going to move to the PC. The PC is probably the greatest way to learn Japanese, just because of how useful a computer is, and all these different tools that you can use, all these different options that you have. Realistically, having a computer is going to be the most beneficial tool to help you learn Japanese with. Like I already previously said, using things like Yomi-chan and Tenten to be able to look up the words instantly with your mouse over, that's obviously incredibly good, but there's also some other tools that you can use to help you learn Japanese with. So for example, let's say that you're really into visual novels. Well, you could use something like Textractor. And what this does is it actually finds the actual line of text in the video game, and it pulls that line of text, the actual data, so it's 100% correct. It pulls that line, that data from the game files, and then you can actually use that to pass the information. You can look things up just like with Yomi-chan. You can even use it with translations. And that's really good for visual novels. Really, really good for visual novels. Other games, it's not so great. So if you're not super into visual novels, sometimes the Textractor type, text hooker type tools might work, but normally it's just visual novels that it works with. However, if for example you want something that's a little bit simpler, not so complicated with all of the text hooking, you can actually use something like Game to Text. This is a pretty cool app made by actually someone on the Game Gengo Discord, Matthew-chan, and this is actually a pretty cool program that's kind of like an OCR image reader. So it takes a screenshot of your screen and then it passes that data, with the image, it creates text from the image. This is really, really good with any game that has kind of a simple background behind the text. So not like movie subtitles, right, that's just the text, but something that actually has like a background that blocks out the game visuals behind, makes the text really clear. For example, something like Persona 4, it works really well with, and games like that, right? Something like Pokemon, something like Final Fantasy, where the text is really, really clear. And this tool is fantastic. All you have to do, really simply, is just draw a square around the text that you're looking at, and then it will pass that information. And if it's not correct, you can just try again. Really helpful. It's not super accurate. It's probably around 80 to 90% accurate. It's very, very good though, and it really can help you learning Japanese when you're kind of looking things up. Another thing that I really like about the game to text is that it uses a browser when you're actually looking things up. That means that the text is on the internet. So this works with Yomi-chan or Tenten, so you can just instantly highlight and look up the text, which for me is the most streamlined way of looking something up. I would only use a dictionary if I want to get additional information, not the quick, easy answer. But for example, like I would use kanshudo.com to find out how rare is this piece of language, because kanshudo.com actually has rankings for all of the words, so you can actually find out, is this something I really need to know? Which is really beneficial to be able to find that out. I personally never use Jisho. It's quite limited, it's not that great. It's a really good beginner's dictionary, but I personally find the combination of Tenten and Yomi-chan, and then Kanshudo if I'm really stuck, to be the best way. And then the next step would probably be looking things up in Japanese, but that's more for the advanced student. Okay, so now what I'd like to do is actually go through some games together with you, using some of the tools and the way of thinking, and kind of having a look at the approach that you might want to take when you try to learn Japanese with video games. We'll be having a look at an example for both beginners, intermediates, and even advanced level students, and maybe some tools that I would recommend you use in your different situation. Okay, so let's just say for example that you're a complete beginner and you know absolutely no Japanese at all. How would you go about approaching a game? So my personal thoughts are that it's definitely possible to play a game as a complete beginner. However, you really want to either have a game that is just by itself incredibly accessible, or have really good tools, or a combination of them both, in order to help you access the language as quick and easy as possible. So for example, one game that's often highly recommended for new players is Ni no Kuni, and this game is very, very popular because it has furigana on absolutely everything. It is so accessible. You don't need to learn how to read kanji in order to play this game. You can learn kanji as you play this game. The tricky thing is, if you know absolutely nothing, you're going to have a tough time with things like conjugations and what is a word, what is grammar, what is vocab, what is a particle. So much in language that you're going to be tripped up by. The good thing about Ni no Kuni, for example, or any game that has furigana, is that you can instantly look at the word and you can read it, so you don't have to worry about kanji. But how do you deal with all of the other pieces of language? That's the tricky part. So let's just take a look at this example sentence right here from the very beginning of the game and have a look at how difficult this language might be, for example. Okay, so the first piece of dialogue that we have here in Ni no Kuni with the voice acting here, here we have Mark, and he says, "Ya oriba, choudo yokatta, kansei shitanda." So let's have a look at this language here and have a look at what it might be like for a complete beginner to approach this language. So not too bad. We have a combination of N5 and N3 vocabulary, as well as a little bit of N5 grammar. So not too difficult. However, that being said, if you only knew N5 grammar, then there is going to be things that you're not going to know. So you would have to look up every word individually. So the good thing about a game with furigana is it makes it really easy to do so. For example, right now we would just type in ya, chuck that into Kanshudo, and we can see that that means hey. Oriba is just Oliver. Choudo yokatta. So choudo yokatta is actually an expression to say that you're just on time. Choudo means just, and then yokatta is the past tense form of yoi or meaning good. So it was just right? So you're just on time. So that's a little bit of an advanced language that might be difficult to look up even in a dictionary. Then we have kansei shitanda. Kansei suru is an N3 piece of language which means to complete something, and then the nda, it is that, it's explaining something. So it is that I just finished. And again with this next sentence, ja oba-san ga itteta misetai mono te. So now we have a little bit more complicated pieces of language. So again, you would need to look this up all on a dictionary on Kanshudo, for example. So remember that this is the approach to go through the language without any tools, but just using dictionary lookups. And this is made possible by having a game that has furigana. You could also do this with a game, for example, that has like a voice log. All you have to do is, instead of reading the furigana, you just need to hear what they say and then write that down. That's really good for developing your listening skills. For example, like here with Marco and the Galaxy Dragon, this is a visual novel on PC, but it's also available on Switch. And I actually kind of forgot to put it on my tier list because I already had it on my Steam tier list. But here, for example, you can replay the audio. So you may not be able to read the sentence down there as a complete beginner or no matter what level you are. However, if you replay the audio, then you can test your listening and try and see if you understand. So let's try it together.
しかもなんで俺様の許可なくオークションに出してんだよ
Okay, so that's quite hard to like get it all at once. So perhaps what you could do is take it bit by bit. So we can read the first part, しかも. So you would type that into a dictionary and find out what that means. One cool thing about this game is we can actually see the English translation at the same time. So we can see that しかも means also. なんで means why. 俺 is for me. And then we have 俺 something. So let's find out. What does it say?
しかもなんで俺様の許可なくオークションに出してんだよ
So it was 俺様.
しかもなんで俺様の許可なくオークションに出してんだ
Okay, so 俺様. So now you would look that up, type that up into Kanshudo, for example, and find out what 俺様 is. This is just a very arrogant way of saying 俺, right? Putting a honorific for your own name, for your own self. It really makes you very, very arrogant. So 俺様, so me, no. What was that next word?
しかもなんで俺様の許可なくオークションに出してんだよ
So he said it very quickly. So this is really good for your listening practice to kind of test. He's also speaking a little bit strangely, but it's good to practice your listening, right? So maybe if you don't want to rely on furigana and you want to practice your ear, having a game that has a lot of voice acting with logs could really benefit you a lot. This game is a little bit crazy with the music and everything and the crazy voice acting. Let's try with a game that's a little bit more mellow.
前提として動画の女性の監禁場所はこの近くである可能性が高い
Okay, so this game is much more chill, much more fun. I love this game. It's probably one of my favorite games ever for learning Japanese with. Although it is difficult, I just love the presentation so much. So here we have Buddy Mission Bond with the wonderful music going on in the background. So here is quite a difficult amount of language, as you can see, right? This is one of my highest rated games on my Switch tier list video. I love this game so much, but if you were a complete beginner, this is scary. So one good thing about having logs, for example, is that you can replay the audio. So let's try that right now. So here we can press the Rekishi button, which means history, and we can replay any of the audio we want. So let's replay the audio from right now.
前提として動画の女性の
Okay, so zente toshite, that's the first part here. So we would type in zente and we'd find out what that means on Kanshudo. Okay, let's have a look at the next part of the sentence. So we'll replay the audio again.
前提として動画の女性の監禁場所はこの近くである可能性が高い
Okay, so the first part was doga no jose. So again, we'll type that down. Thankfully here we have furigana. We can see how useful it is when a game has furigana right here. Kankin, so we can just write that very instantly. We don't have to replay the audio. So kankin, and then kankin, I believe that was basho. Let's have a look.
前提として動画の女性の監禁場所はこの近くである可能性が高い
Yep, it was basho. So the music's so good. So let's type in basho. Or actually, let's type in kankin basho. And then the final part of this sentence, so let's check it one more time.
前提として動画の女性の監禁場所はこの近くである可能性が高い
Kono chikaku de aru kanosei ga takai. So that might take you a few attempts to actually listen to and get that, but just for time's sake, I'll do it a bit quicker. So let's just write down that sentence and we'll have a look at everything. Okay, so what I've done is I've just written the whole sentence into Kanshudos just for the sake of ease so we can have a look at everything really simply. So let's have a look. So the first part here is zente. We can see that it means an assumption, prerequisite, or a hypothesis. Toshite means as or for, like from the viewpoint of or in the role of. So from the viewpoint of a hypothesis or in the role of a hypothesis. So that's relatively difficult language. We can see here it's N1 zente. Then we have doga, so that's a video. Doga no jose, that's a woman. No kankin, confinement. Basho, place wa. As for kono, this. Chikaku, nearby. De aru, to be. That's the same as des. kanosei ga takai means it's very likely or very probable. So what I would do as a complete beginner, right, in this situation, there's a ton of language that you're like, what the hell? So what I would personally do is just have a look at all of the bits and pieces nice and quickly and then put it together. So let's try that right now, okay? So zente toshite, as a hypothesis. Douga no jose, so the woman of the video. No, so this is the possession, so we're showing possession of something. Kankin basho wa, so wa means as for. As for the confinement place, right, of the woman in the douga, in the video. That's the first part that we've broken down. This part right here is all kind of a clause. And we can know that because the wa particle marks the topic of the sentence. This is what we're talking about. The confinement place of the woman from the video. Then we have the final part of the sentence. I'm just going to do a spacebar for you just so you can see really clearly. Kono, this, chikaku, nearby. So nearby here, de aru, to be, it's very probable. So what is very probable to be near here? The place of confinement of the girl in the video. So we can see here that he saw a video with a girl being captured and he says that it must be somewhere near here. And so he says if we take it as a hypothesis, then the girl from, the video should be somewhere near here. The probability is very high. And that's it. Once you've just gone through the language, I would move on. Okay, you don't need to worry about looking into the depths of de aru. You don't need to look into, how often kankin is used, and you don't need to look into why does kono chikaku, this close to this, mean, the place or whatever. Don't worry, just pick it up over time, right? The more exposure you get, the more you're going to get a feel for how the language is used. If you spend the next 20 minutes looking up each piece of these individual words and really researching them, you're going to end up getting bored, you're going to get distracted from the game, you're going to feel overwhelmed. So my advice would be to go through it as quickly and as enjoyably as possible. Now, that was a little bit difficult, right? That required a lot of steps. Because there wasn't any furigana, we had a really tough time kind of looking up all of the words. Good practice, right? Really good listening practice, but it was difficult because we had to keep replaying the audio and keep on trying to get the word right and then write it all down. There are easier ways to go about this. So, let's say, for example, that you have your phone on you. Well, you can very simply download a Google Lens and just take a photo of this page right here, and Google Lens will actually pick up that language so you can see the text and then you can break it down yourself. So you'll have the text. The problem is it's on your phone. However, you can do the same thing with PC as well. You can take a screenshot and then chuck the screenshot in Google Lens and it can pass that information. Awesome, right? That's pretty cool. Quite easy to kind of pass the information, but that wouldn't necessarily be my suggestion. I would recommend either playing a game with furigana to kind of build that experience, or something with like a game script, for example. Or what you could do is use a really useful tool called game to text. And so very simply, all you would need to do is just draw this box around the text, and then it will instantly pass that image and turn it into text. As we can see, everything that is on the game right now just instantly got turned into text at the bottom of the screen, which is ridiculously good. And the accuracy is 100%. Look at that. It read the game text 100%. So once you have this text, then all you have to do is hover your mouse over it and you can instantly read it with a program like Tenten or Yomi-chan, which is a browser extension. And this is my recommended way of playing. If you have a game script, or like here, being able to actually turn your game into a script, then you have complete power with Tenten or Yomi-chan. And this is so much better. This is my highest recommended way of playing. When you have the actual text that you can use, it makes it so quick. Have a look at this. So for example, like here from Persona 4. So let's go through this with game to text and just see how much more simpler this process is to look up language. So all you have to do is just very simply draw that square around all of the text, and then it will instantly get picked up. So as we can see, let's have a look at the accuracy. So it's pretty close. Right now it's around about 95% accurate. There is one mistake, right? So it's not perfect, but it's definitely helpful, because have a look at how much quicker this is to go through everything. Okay, so now instead of having to listen and write it all down, let's just hover our mouse. Taiiku, PE. Kyoshi, teacher. So Taiiku Kyoshi is a PE teacher. no, so we're talking about someone, and then we have the names. This is going to be tough because kanji is very difficult. It could be konto, it could be kondo. I'm probably sure it's kondo. That's a very strong sounding name for a PE teacher, right? So we have taiku kyoshi no kondo da. So I am your PE teacher, kondo. Then we have hito, so this is for people. It could also be jin, but as we see, it's used as a suffix. This isn't a suffix, this is the beginning of a sentence, so it's the noun, hito. That means a person. Hito ga, so they are doing an action, that's the ga particle, the subject of the sentence, pretty much the thing that's doing something. Hito ga inaku, and then we have bete na, but here we can see it's inakute na. So what we could try to do is try to pass that information again, see if we can get a clearer sentence. Nope, didn't do it clearer. Yep, but this time it did. So, hito ga inakute na. So, inai here is with a negative form of iru. As we can see, it's all written right here. Iru, to exist, negative, te form. Which means that someone doesn't exist, someone isn't here, right? The hito ga inakute, so a person isn't here. Nakute na, this is more of kind of a ne, hey, look here, listen. Ore, me, but it's more of a rough way of talking about me. So ore ga, so again, I'm the one that's going to be doing something, right? Eigo here for English, o, so we're doing something to English because this is the object marker. And then we have tanto suru, being in charge of. How much quicker is that? So now all we have to do is use the highlighting tools to then go back through all of this and have a look. Oh, and this time it did it perfectly. So let's just try and put it all together. So, taiku kyoshi no kondo da. I am the PE teacher kondo. Hito ga inakute na. So someone isn't here. Ore ga eigo tanto suru. I'll be in charge of the English class. Easy, right? So very, very simple using something like game to text, or if you have a game script for a game, then you don't even need to worry about game to text. You just highlight over that game. Now, you can also do this with things like visual novels with text extractors and get all of the data instantly. You don't even have to go through the process yourself. However, it's mainly only used for visual novels, and it's not necessarily quite as easy as this. You do need to do a little bit of tricky, hooking the text around. It's not too complicated. You can find some videos on how to use text hookers if you're interested in playing visual novels. Textractor is a very common, popular one. However, personally, for me, something like this or a game script is much more appealing. Okay, so let's have a look at game scripts. I've been talking a lot about that, and that's something that I highly recommend. In fact, it's probably my favorite way of playing a game, if you can, in Japanese, because it's just so quick and easy. And I'm talking about for like a beginner, right? For me personally, if I could go back, I would probably play my first couple of games with a game script to make it really simple. Now, there are a ton of games that have game scripts. There's a person called Joe Mako who has a spreadsheet of all kinds of games with game scripts. I'll leave a link in the description. There's also a bunch of game scripts on the Game Gengo Discord, stuff that's not on Joe Mako's list. And also, you can find them yourself if you just type in Serifu Shu in Japanese, and that with the game name, for example, you can actually find game scripts that way. Although it is quite challenging, and I wouldn't really recommend beginners try and search for game scripts themselves. It's better just to pick from a game that has a game script. For example, Final Fantasy VII. So, like for example here with Final Fantasy VII, the game that I personally used to first learn Japanese. It was my first game that I played fully in Japanese, and I used some game scripts along the way to help me. So, for example, right here, if you're a complete beginner, you may know like one word from this sentence, everything else you probably don't know. Not only that, but even if you study the JLPT, I believe one of these words you won't see at all in the JLPT whatsoever. So this could be challenging, right? This game doesn't have furigana, doesn't have voice acting, and it doesn't have any kind of logs or anything to help you kind of look things up. However, if you have a game script, this becomes the easiest game to learn Japanese with, and I'll show you how. So incredibly simply, all you have to do is find the text that you're currently looking at. What you might want to do is do Control F and quickly find the line. For example, right here, we might know here, ikuzo, right? The first sentence, just for example, right? So you would just do Control F, ikuzo. And as we can see, it's the very top of the script. Obviously, it's the first line of dialogue in the game, but Just so you know, that's a very simple way of looking up the language. Find something you know how to read and then quickly do Control F. So let's have a look. How would you now approach the language with the game script? Well, it's incredibly easy. Let's just highlight our mouse over iku, to go, zo adds force or indicates command, shiiri is a newcomer. So let's go, newcomer. And then we have ore, me, rough. Ni is a little bit more difficult. You may need to kind of learn this over time, how it's used. You could see that it's used in at a place, to a direction, for a purpose. It's quite a complicated piece of language that you will learn over time, but we have it connected to tsuzuku, which is to follow, to continue. So here, tsuzuke is the imperative form. It says it right there. So you're following, and the ni is showing what you're following. Ore, me. So, hey, newcomer, follow me. So that was much quicker, right? That was a very quick way of going through something. You didn't require any extra tools. It didn't require any special things. It didn't require you listening. It didn't require you typing anything in. It was just quick and easy. And that's really my recommendation when you're starting out, because everything is going to be really overwhelming for you. You don't want the looking up process to also be overwhelming, right? So if you can find a game that you're interested in that has a game script, especially something like this that has dual language game script, then you are going to find the process so much more enjoyable to go through your first game in Japanese. And realistically, once you've gone through like 1 or 2 games in Japanese, you're going to be at a much higher level. You're going to be much more confident and able to take on more games that you might want to do without a game script. The cool thing about this game script, which I actually haven't seen around too much, I found this years ago, created by this guy here, Jason Maltz. Absolute legend. This guy has the entire game. Look, even with the English, even with the romaji, if you can't read the kanji, this is my translation on the side. It's not for the whole thing, but you can see it's for the whole game. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You can go through the entire game, every part of the entire game of Final Fantasy VII. Thousands and thousands and thousands of lines of dialogue are all written down with the English translation, with the romaji. It's ridiculously useful. So if you can find a game that you want to play with a game script, there's lots of games. Most Final Fantasies have a game script. Fire Emblem 3 Heroes has a game script. Some of the Tales games have a game script. There's so many, and I'd really recommend you guys check out either Jormarkel's spreadsheet in the description, or if you're on the Game Gengo Discord, then you can come check out the game script list as well. I think I'm probably going to have to compile a spreadsheet sometime soon of all of the games, because it really is useful for people, and I think it would be actually worth making a video just on game scripts and kind of showing off just how useful and amazing they can be. So for me, the most important thing when trying to play a game in Japanese is the accessibility that you have to that language. If you can quickly find out what something means, whether because the game has furigana, making it really easy to read the kanji, whether it has voice acting to help you listen to the words, or a log to help you look things up much quicker, or maybe if you're using some sort of tool like a text hooker, or for example game to text, or even just a game script. I highly recommend everyone install 1010 on your browser, or Yomi-chan. They're both excellent browser extensions that can really help you find the language really quickly, and that is how I would recommend going by things. I would not recommend slugging through language, looking everything up with stroke order. Those days are long gone. You don't need to do that when playing games in Japanese. Try and find some tool that's going to help you, or a game that's incredibly accessible, and potentially you could play that game no matter what level you are. That being said though, I do have some recommendations for beginners when you're starting out learning Japanese. I really do believe that you should pick something that you love. First and foremost, if you love Nier Automata, great, give it a shot. It's gonna be really hard, really ridiculously mind-blowingly hard, but if you love it, then it's going to be worthwhile. Okay, I know someone that absolutely loves Metal Gear Solid, and they used Metal Gear Solid to help them learn Japanese. Would I recommend that to a low-level student? No, it's very, very difficult, complicated language. But if you love something, then that's going to help you keep going through. And that, at the end of the day, is the most important thing. that you're enjoying the journey. Don't put so much stress on yourself and so much pressure that you have to learn things the most efficient way. You can if you want, but it's just not going to be a very enjoyable life. And you will make lots of progress. Look, Anki and stuff is incredible. I used it for a long time and I definitely see the appeal, and I definitely see that it certainly fits a certain type of person, right? That really loves collecting numbers and seeing their efficiency charts and, you know, really feeling the sense of progress when you can see, oh, I've learned 16,000 words, ha ha ha, something I used to do. But you don't have to do that, right? If you're not enjoying the Anki grind, that's not a problem. You can enjoy the learning process if you just find something that you love doing. And if you have some of these tools, then maybe that can help you push to kind of get rid of some of the negative feelings when you're trying to climb up the mountain of Japanese that you don't understand. Having these tools can just help that journey make it a lot more accessible and enjoyable. So some games that I really recommend for beginners is first and foremost a game that you love, right? That's going to be the first and foremost. However, just know that it's always going to be easier for you if you pick something that has some of the things that I've mentioned in this video. For example, if you're looking for a game that has furigana, I would highly recommend the Famicom Detective series, Bond, Buddy Mission Bond. Some of the new Pokemon games like Scarlet and Violet have furigana. Yokai Watch is really good for furigana. There's also Ni no Kuni, an incredibly good game for furigana. Highly recommended if you're wanting to get into the more RPG realm. This is going to be the perfect beginner game for you. Dragon Quest XI also has furigana. However, be careful when buying the PC version. I've heard stories that it's not available. However, it is available on the Nintendo Switch and PS4 versions if you buy it on the Japanese store. Furigana is going to help you a lot. Some really good games that have logs. If you don't care too much about furigana, maybe you're a little bit more of an intermediate student, I would highly recommend something that's a little bit more visual novel-y, so it has a lot more text. However, personally, I'm not a huge visual novel fan, so I would personally really recommend something like Persona 4, Persona 5. Now, there is some challenging sections like Igor, but it has the logs, which makes it quite accessible, and you can use game to text with it, so it makes it very readable. I would highly recommend any visual novel that you're interested in, that you can use, you know, text hooking with, or something that has dual language. I'm not too sure of many visual novels that have furigana, however, you can get over that by actually using the text hookers. Although, as I said, the Famicom Detective and Buddy Mission Bond on Nintendo Switch do have furigana, so they're really recommended. 13 Sentinels and AI Somnium are really good games that have logs available for you to be able to go through. They don't have furigana, but they're very accessible. So if you're looking for something that has a log, I'd really recommend something like Persona 4, 13 Sentinels, or AI Somnium. If you want something that has a really accessible game script, then you have a huge choice of games to check out. Chrono Trigger has a pretty decent game script, however there are parts of the game that aren't written down. The Final Fantasy VII game script in comparison is much more comprehensive. Actually, Final Fantasy VII Remake has a really good game script as well, however the game itself isn't very easy to approach for a language learner. Most of the Final Fantasies have a game script available online, so that's really good. I personally recommend 7 and 8 and maybe number 9, although 9 has a little bit more fantasy speech, but they're all really good and they have a lot of really good game scripts available. Fire Emblem Three Houses is really good. It has a game script and it also has logs with voice acting. I did mention Metal Gear Solid earlier. Actually, I've released a video on my channel that is the entire Metal Gear Solid 1 subtitled in Japanese. I manually wrote it all down, subtitled, so that's actually quite useful if you want to use Metal Gear Solid. And that's kind of a game script. Persona 4 and Persona 5 have game scripts available online, which is really good because they also have logs, which so you can really pick and choose whatever you want. And actually, Dragon Quest XI also has a game script that I found personally online, and that's also really good. Now, there's a whole ton of game scripts. You can check out Jormako, or you can check out the Game Gengo Discord. There's a ton of game scripts available online, but my personal recommendations would actually be the Final Fantasy game script, and I'll leave a link in the description for you guys, the one that I personally used, because I actually haven't seen this shared around a lot. I found it years ago. It's absolutely godlike, so this one's really good. For any other game, I would highly recommend trying something like, for example, using Google Lens on your phone to look things up quick and easily, or game to text, which is really cool to quickly get the instant text versions of the files that you're looking for, which can make things very accessible. And I love that you can just instantly highlight over the text with Yomi-chan or 1010. That makes it just absolutely god tier. So if you can get it to work with a game that has maybe a clear background, I highly recommend that. And so ultimately, at the end of the day, the most important thing is that you enjoy the process, right? So if you're at a level where you're really low level and you're not enjoying learning Japanese with video games, even with the use of these tools, then maybe just put it off for a little while. Study some language, study some grammar, study some vocab, try and finish the grammar videos on Game Gengo, and learn maybe, a couple thousand vocabulary and then try again, right? It's okay to be like, this is too much. That's totally fine. But just know that everyone goes through that struggle. Seriously, it was really hard for me when I first started playing games in Japanese, and I learned tens and thousands of words, but I still had difficulty. The reason why was because that language that you're going to come across in video games, you're not going to see anywhere else. Yes, there is a whole ton of fundamental language that you're going to need, and that does kind of stop around about the N3, N2 level. There will be bits and pieces, of course, of the N2 and N1 that really are important, but generally speaking, once you're past the N3 point, then you know most of the fundamental stuff. Then the rest is kind of a little bit more rarer. That being said though, if you enjoy the process of playing a game in Japanese, you find the tools that help you do that, then you're going to be able to learn so much Japanese in a more enjoyable manner. And ultimately, I believe that's the most important thing. If you had fun today, if you look forward to doing it tomorrow and you think you're probably going to feel like this for a while, then that's going to be excellent for your Japanese study. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video and hopefully maybe got some ideas about how you might learn Japanese yourself with video games. I'd love to see what you guys think though, because seriously, there is no correct way to study Japanese. Seriously, I'm not just saying that. There is no correct way. Everyone's different. Everyone has their own likes and interests and methods and styles. And that's the great thing, right? Finding what's best for you, finding your personal style, finding your way, of learning Japanese. So I really just hope that you guys can find a fun way of learning Japanese and not feel like you have to slug through all of this horrible, boring stuff. Because seriously, you can make it fun. It doesn't have to be a drag, but it will be difficult, just like any skill, right? Any skill takes time. If you want to be a master chef so Gordon Ramsay will pat you on the back, then it's going to take a lot of hard work, right? You need to work towards something in order to build up yourself. But I truly believe that if you find, for example, a game you love, like Final Fantasy VII, I love Final Fantasy VII, then by the time you go through that game and you go through the game scripts and you read all of the dialogue and you've gone through that experience of passing all the language and putting it all together, you're going to wake up one day and be like, oh my god, I can do it on my own. I don't need the training wheels anymore, because you've been exposed to the language enough. You've been exposed to the structure enough that you don't need that anymore. Just don't be so hard on yourself and know that you are making progress, even if you sometimes don't feel like it. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thanks so much for watching, and I hope you guys continue to enjoy learning Japanese. Thanks so much for watching. A huge thank you to all the supporters on Patreon. If you'd like to support this channel and help me with what I'm doing, I am only one man. I would really appreciate you guys joining us on Patreon. Come say hi on the Game Gengo Discord community. It really does help me out as I'm trying to go full time and trying to teach Japanese with video games and kind of make learning Japanese a fun experience for people and try and get away from the more stressful, boring, efficient way and just look at more of having fun, right? Really enjoying the learning experience, and hopefully I can help contribute in some way to people enjoying them learn Japanese. So make sure to leave a comment below letting me know of your personal study style and what you think would be really good. I would love it if you guys could help each other out in the comment section, let each other know what are some good ways of studying and maybe some recommendations, because we all have different ways and I'd love to hear what you guys think. So thanks so much guys for watching. I'll see you all again in the next video. See ya.